Okay, let me go ahead now and hit a few news stories I haven't gotten to, and then I'm going to break down the Cybersecurity Act control grid and just use that new announcement, this new cabinet level position out of the White House, not just an example of federalization and federal takeover and control, but admitting everything will be wiretapped, which it already is. This just expands it, and admitting that it's so they can kill switch everything. I want to go over that today and tie it in to the whole eugenics situation. But in the interest of time, because we do have Steve Voss coming up and Kinky Friedman in studio, I want to go ahead and run through some of the news that we have here. Here's my Wall Street Journal article. Stack of stuff just gets bigger and bigger here. In a first, high court affirms gun rights. Now, remember, we heard that June 27, 2008. It was another Wall Street Journal. I printed this morning. There's another Wall Street Journal dealing with how Sotomayor's rulings, where she has said in previous federal courts, that's the one I want, where she says, yes, you have a right for us to take your guns. You have a right to join the military. That is the Second Amendment. No one is allowed to own guns. The Attorney General has that opinion. Eric Holder, the President, as a state senator and U.S. senator, held that opinion. That's on record. It's not our opinion. They've introduced bills to massively restrict the Second Amendment. Here's a Bloomberg I have on it, but this doesn't really get into Sotomayor. It says, headline, Chicago law banning handguns in city upheld by court. And the Wall Street Journal article is good because it gets into Sotomayor and then lists all her activities. A Chicago ordinance banning handguns and automatic weapons within city limits was upheld by the U.S. Court of Appeals panel, which rejected a challenge by the National Rifle Association. The unanimous three-judge panel ruled today that the U.S. Supreme Court decision last year, which recognized individual right to bear arms under the U.S. Constitution's Second Amendment, didn't apply to states and municipalities. And that Supreme Court ruling was 5-4, very, very narrowly for the Second Amendment. And I read the statements of the court, which were added into precedent, and I argued with some of the pro-gun groups, and I said, this is the consistent thing George W. Bush said and what Handgun Control Incorporated says. They're saying, oh, you have a right to Second Amendment if you're in the military, but we have a right to ban your guns. And I kept warning people, this is what you're now going to see. And now they've had states ruling this way, cities ruling this way, counties ruling this way. And see, the federal government's only there to protect the Bill of Rights and to have a Navy and defend the borders and to coin the money. And they don't do any of those things they're supposed to. This is one issue where the states do not have a right to restrict the Second Amendment. They have no right. This is a federal right. And it is also reserved to the states. But when the states try to go after that, or the feds do, it's null and void. And I've read the anti-federalist papers, the federalist papers. I have read scores of books on the real Second Amendment, and that is the facts. Anybody tells you something else, they're a liar. A Chicago ordinance banning handguns and automatic weapons within city limits was upheld by the U.S. Court of Appeals panel, which rejected a challenge of the National Rifle Association. The unanimous three-judge panel ruled today that the U.S. Supreme Court decision last year, which recognized an individual right to bear arms under the U.S. Constitution, Second Amendment, didn't apply to states and municipalities. The Supreme Court has rebuffed requests to apply the Second Amendment to the states. U.S. Circuit Court Frank Esterbrook wrote, upholding lower court decisions last year to throw out suits against Chicago and its suburb of Oak Park, Illinois. In Fairfax, Virginia-based NRA sued the municipalities in June of 2008, one day after the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the District of Columbia versus Heller struck down the handgun ban in the U.S. Capitol District encompassing Washington. It was, see, this thing's making it sound reasonable. They've got basically all guns banned in Chicago, and if you can go pay for a special permit and jump through a bunch of hoops, you can own one, a rifle. It was a total gun ban in D.C. For all intents and purposes, but they act like it was just handguns. We clearly disagree with the court's conclusion. Representative of the NRA, Attorney William N. Howard, a partner in Chicago's Freeborn and Peters LLP, said in a telephone interview, the next step will be an appeal to the Supreme Court. We recognize this may not be the end of litigation. Jenny Hoyle, A spokeswoman for the City of Chicago Law Department said, acknowledging the likelihood the NRA would seek further review, we're certainly prepared for that if it happens. We're prepared to aggressively defend our ordinance because Chicago is mafia-don, daily run. And when the mafia comes in and robs a bank, they say, get your hands up. They make the security guard, the American people, drop their guns. I mean, Hitler took the people's guns. Blacks couldn't own guns. Native Americans couldn't own guns. When you're going to enslave somebody and muscle them and push them around, you want them disarmed, so you have to come to the mafia for protection, which is the police and the government. See, they want to be able to oppress you and you can't resist them, and they want crime to explode, as their own white papers admit, so there needs to be more and more cops, more and more control to then feed off that larger crime system and basically tax the criminals. So they want a big, healthy crime syndicate to scare the sucker public into submitting to them, and have a big, healthy criminal system that they can suck off of as well. So they suck off the criminals and they suck off the slaves. The Second Amendment, adopted in 1791 as part of the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment reads in its entirety, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free country and the right of the people to keep bear arms shall not be infringed. In Heller, the High Court struck down the Washington 32-year-old gun law, which barred most residents of the city from owning handguns and required that all legal firearms be kept unloaded and either disassembled or under trigger lock. 6 residents had challenged the law, saying they wanted firearms available in their homes for self-defense. Yeah, people that got raped and robbed. So there you go. I told you what the Supreme Court ruling would do. I read it. And it says you got a right to the Second Amendment. And then they say we're going to define what Second Amendment means. Second Amendment means we come and you hand your guns over. Period. You have a right to turn your guns over. Because it says we have a right to ban whatever we want. Oh, yeah, you got a right, but we got a right to ban it. That's just like the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Articles 1 through 30. Or is it 31? And Article 29 and 30 state, all these great rights we just said you have that we say we give you, UN doesn't give you anything. You got to take it. As a free person, your red blood and your guts gives you freedom. They say in there, in that piece of legislation that Obama's got introduced, that they're going to ban most of the guns. So this is happening. This is going on. And in the articles of the UN Charter of Declaration of Human Rights 29 and 30, it says all these rights don't count if we say they don't. So it's no rights at all. The good old folks at New Silver Solution. And the website is supernaturalsilver.com. Supernaturalsilver.com. This is something that kills bacteria, viruses, you name it, well documented. They've got it down to a super small nano-sized particle. Supernaturalsilver.com. Check them out at Infowars.com. Supernaturalsilver.com. We are back live. Thank you for joining us. The rest of the hour before Kinky Friedman joins us in studio, I'm going to go over part 2 of the Cybersecurity Act, Cashless Society, global surveillance, tracking, tracing, straitjacket system. What you need to understand is, recapping part 1 and getting into part 2, is that everything is globally standardized through the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperative Development, through the IMF, through the World Bank, through treaties, through NATO. And of these dozens and dozens of groups, there's less than 50 big, powerful global groups, they're all chaired by less than 100 people. And they all interlock on the different boards. You know, the heads of the Bilderberg Group will be some of the head people on the Trilateral Commission, and the head people on the CFR, and the head people on the Club of Rome, and the head people at the Rand Corporation, who are also the head people at the Federal Reserve, who are the head people at the Bank of England, who are the head people at the United Nations, who are at the head people of the OECD, who are the head people of the IMF, at the head people of the World Bank, at the head people of IBM, at the head people of GM, with the head people at Microsoft and Berkshire Hathaway. I mean, you go to these meetings, you cover these meetings, you track these meetings, Davos and others. It's the same crew, the same people, and they want the same thing, eugenics. Now, before I get into the cashless grid, remember this story from a week or two ago, and ABC News reported it first and said, yes, secret meeting of the world elite to carry out eugenics. But they said it's a good thing. Billionaire club and bid to curb overpopulation through a world government. And it has to be secret, they say, for your own good. And it's Bill Gates, it's David Rockefeller, it's Warren Buffett, it's Michael Bloomberg, it's Oprah Winfrey, Ted Turner, all the usual suspects. And they met at Rockefeller University president's private home, Paul Nurse. And listen, anytime you cover these, anytime they have these meetings, that's all they talk about. How do we get world government and world taxes? And so how do we stage pandemics to get a control grid in? It's sad we got to kill everybody, but how do we do it? You know, Bill Joy of Sun Microsystems, I always plug key things that are well known. There's thousands of things we could plug. April issue 2000 of Wired magazine, Why the Future Doesn't Need It.